Have you ever heard of a place that seems to hold the very soul of a community within its walls? A place where every crack in the paint tells a story, and the laughter of generations echoes in the air. Today, we're journeying to the heart of a vibrant neighborhood to uncover the incredible story of Okoro Compound. This isn't just a collection of buildings. It's a living, breathing testament to family, resilience, and the power of shared history. The story begins decades ago with a man named Chief Okoro, a visionary who didn't just want to build a house for himself, but a home for his entire lineage. He laid the first brick with a dream that his family would always have a place to gather, to support one another, and to call their own. As the years went by, the compound grew. What started as a single home expanded, with new rooms and wings added as the family blossomed. Sons and daughters married, grandchildren were born, and each new member added their own chapter to the Okoro legacy. The compound became a maze of interconnected courtyards and verandas, each with its own unique character. The northern wing, with its wide-open spaces, was where the children's games took place from dawn till dusk. The western courtyard was the domain of the matriarchs, a place of wisdom, storytelling, and the most amazing cooking you could ever imagine. But life in Okoro Compound wasn't always easy. The family faced economic hardships, disagreements that tested their bonds, and the constant pressure of the modern world creeping in. There were times when it seemed easier to sell the land, to let each family go its separate way. Yet, the spirit of Chief Okoro's original vision always prevailed. It was in the small moments, an auntie stepping in to care for a sick child, cousins pooling their money to help one of their own start a business, the entire compound coming together to celebrate a wedding or mourn a loss. These moments became the glue that held them together. They created their own internal economy, a support system that was more reliable than any bank. A tailor area mechanic there, a teacher, a nurse. The compound was a self-sufficient ecosystem built on trust and mutual respect. The elders became the keepers of history, their stories a bridge connecting the youngest generation to their roots. They'd sit under the old mango tree in the center of the compound, a tree planted by Chief Okoro himself, and share tales of the past, ensuring that no one ever forgot where they came from. One of the most powerful stories is about the Great Flood of '98. The rains were relentless, and water levels rose alarmingly. While surrounding homes were evacuated, the people of Okoro Compound refused to leave. The younger, stronger members worked tirelessly, building makeshift barriers with sandbags, while the older ones organized food and shelter in the highest, driest rooms. They worked as one, a single unit with a single purpose: to protect their home. When the waters finally receded, the compound stood strong, a little battered, but unbroken. That event became a legend, a symbol of their unbreakable unity. Today, Okoro Compound stands as a beacon in its community. It's a reminder that a home is more than just mortar and bricks. It's about the people within it, the love they share, and the legacy they build together. It challenges our modern ideas of individualism, showing us what can be achieved when a family decides to stand as one. The world outside may change, but within the walls of the compound, the spirit of togetherness, of Ubuntu, I am, because we are, is alive and well. What incredible stories do the places in your community hold? Share them in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. The story of Okoro Compound teaches us that our greatest strength is often found in the people we call family and the places we call home. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey today. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the amazing stories that shape our world. See you next time. The air in the compound hung thick and heavy, the kind of quiet that only comes before a storm. All eyes were on the newcomer, a young woman named Benny. As she stood before the formidable Madame Okoro, the other tenants, peeking from behind their curtains and doorways, held their breath. They knew what was coming. Madame Okoro, our landlady, wasn't just strict. She was a force of nature, and her rules were legendary. Her voice cut through the silence, sharp and unforgiving.
"You are a Benny?" she asked, though it sounded more like an accusation.
Madame Okoro began her usual interrogation, her voice rising with each new rule. No visitors after 9 p.m. No loud music, ever. No parties. No bits. The gate is locked at 10 p.m. sharp. If you're late, you sleep outside. Is that clear? The tenants winced. Many had tried to negotiate these terms. All had failed spectacularly.
But Ebony didn't flinch. "Yes, madame. Perfectly clear," she replied. Her voice as calm as a gentle stream.
Madame Okoro seemed taken aback for a moment. Her rhythm disrupted. She narrowed her eyes. "The rent," she declared, naming a price so high it made several tenants gasp. "It is due on the 25th of each month. Not the 26th. Not the 27th. The 25th. One day late, and I will add a penalty."
Instead, Ebony just smiled again. "That is acceptable, madame. Thank you for your clarity."
The entire compound was speechless. Who was this woman? She agreed to everything without a fight, paid the exorbitant rent without a single complaint, and moved her few belongings into the small back room with a quiet grace. It was completely out of place here. The other tenants, like Mama Chidi and Brother Emeka, exchanged confused glances. They had expected drama, a showdown, something to gossip about for weeks. But Ebony gave them nothing. She was a mystery, an enigma wrapped in a simple dress and a serene smile. From that day on, a new kind of tension settled over the compound. Madame Okoro, instead of being satisfied with her new, compliant tenant, became obsessed. She would stand on her balcony for hours, her gaze fixed on Ebony's door. She would appear suddenly when Ebony was fetching water, questioning her about where she was going, who she was seeing. If Ebony received a package, Madame Okoro would demand to know what was inside. She timed Ebony's trips to the market. She even tried peeking through her window at night. The landlady's suspicion was like a shadow, growing longer and darker with each passing day. The other tenants started to feel it too. They had initially been wary of Ebony, but now they felt a strange mix of pity and fear for her. Madame Okoro's constant surveillance created an atmosphere of unease, making everyone feel like they were living in a prison. Why was the landlady so fixated on Ebony? What did she expect to find? The quiet new tenant had brought a storm to the compound after all. Just not the one anyone had expected. The question on everyone's mind was no longer who Ebony was, but what dark secret Madame Okoro was so desperate to uncover. The silent war had begun. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to see what happens next in this story. Later that day, Mama Zubri gathered the tenants and told them what had happened. She accused the girl of greeting, she said, shaking her head in disbelief. Chibanachi couldn't help but laugh, nearly falling off a stool. But the laughter quickly faded as the weight of the situation settled in. One person, however, wasn't laughing. Boduri, the caretaker. He stood near the gate, watching Ebony return from work. When she greeted him politely, "Good evening," he nodded and returned the greeting. But his gaze shifted toward Madame Okoro's balcony, where she stood watching the exchange. Boduri sighed a deep, tired sound, as if he had seen this all before. "History is walking back into this compound," he muttered to himself. He shook his head slowly before turning back to his usual spot by the gate, where he sat on his small wooden stool every evening. From there, he could see almost everything that happened in Okoro compound. Years of watching tenants had turned him into a human security camera, always alert, always observing. Inside the compound, the usual evening activities began. Pots clanged against stoves. Someone fried plantains near the corridor, and Mama Zuberi carried her plastic chair outside, sitting confidently like a woman who knew that compound life would never lack entertainment. Chibanachi joined her shortly after. "You're here again," Chibanachi remarked. Mama Zuberi looked at her, feigning offense. "My daughter, if you live in this compound and you don't sit outside, how will you understand your neighbors?" Orgonoma arrived shortly after with her sewing basket, sitting quietly beside them. Mama Zuberi lowered her voice and began speaking. "Have you people noticed something?" Chibanachi smiled. "That Madame Okoro watches that girl like an immigration officer, right?" Mama Zuberi snapped her fingers. "Exactly." Organome nodded slowly. "She doesn't trust her. But the girl has done nothing," Chibanachi protested. Mama Zuberi leaned forward, lowering her voice. "That's not the point." Chibanachi blinked. What's the point then? Mama Zuberi sighed deeply. Sometimes a person does not hate you because of what you did. They hate you because of what someone else did to them. Chibonachi paused, her eyes widening. HM? That sounds deep. Mama Zuberi shrugged. I heard it in a Nollywood film. Just then, Abeni stepped out of her room with a small bucket to fetch water. She greeted the women politely. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. My daughter, Mama Zuberi replied warmly. Abeni smiled and walked towards the tap. Over the next few weeks, Madame Okoro found fault in everything Abeni did. One morning, she complained that Abeni had swept too early. The next day, she said Abeni had swept too late. Another afternoon, she accused her of attracting too many greetings. It seemed that no matter what Abeni did, Madame Okoro was always there, finding fault. Mama Zuberi shook her head. This woman will not rest. Chibonachi nodded. The girl has not even brought one visitor since she moved in. Organom added quietly. I'm convinced now that Madame Okoro is just fighting shadows from her past. Mama Zuberi leaned closer, her voice almost a whisper. You people still don't know the story. Chibonachi leaned forward eagerly. What story? Mama Zuberi lowered her voice even more. I finally heard it from my cousin who used to live in this compound 15 years ago. Chibonachi's eyes widened. What happened? What happened? In the bustling heart of our neighborhood lived Madame Okoro, a woman whose heart had been turned to stone by betrayal. Years ago, her compound was a lively place, filled with the laughter of families. But that was before Idara. Idara was a tenant, young and beautiful, with a smile that could charm a snake, and it did. It charmed Madame Okoro's husband right out of his marital bed and into hers. The affair shattered Madame Okoro's world. When her husband eventually left with Idara, a cold bitterness settled in her heart, and she declared war on beauty itself. From that day on, no woman she deemed too attractive could find a home in her compound. The application process became an interrogation. Are you married? She'd ask, her eyes scanning for any hint of flirtatiousness. Do you have frequent male visitors? Any woman with a bit too much flair, a little too much confidence, was shown the door. The compound, once vibrant, became a quiet, somber place, populated by those who could pass Madame Okoro's strict, unspoken test of plainness. The remaining tenants walked on eggshells, careful not to draw her wrath. They knew the story of Idara and understood, even if they didn't agree with the source of her pain. But life has a funny way of shaking things up. One sunny afternoon, a sleek car pulled up to the compound, and out stepped Akane. Madame Okoro's son, home after 5 years in Lagos. Akane was the spitting image of his father in his youth, but he had his mother's observant eyes. He was tall, successful, and carried an air of easy confidence that the compound hadn't seen in years. His arrival was like a fresh breeze cutting through stale air. Madame Okoro's face, usually a mask of stern disapproval, softened just a fraction when she saw him. For the first time in a long time, a genuine smile touched her lips. Akane was taken aback by the oppressive quietness of his childhood home. He remembered a place filled with life, not this hushed and anxious quiet. He noticed the weary looks on the tenants' faces and the conspicuous absence of young, vibrant women. He tried to talk to his mother about it, gently suggesting that the compound felt empty. But Madame Okoro would just purse her lips and change the subject. The wound was still too raw, the betrayal too deep for her to even acknowledge the prison she had built around herself. She couldn't see that in trying to protect herself from another Idara. She was suffocating the very life out of her home. The real test came when Okane brought home his fiancée Amara. She was everything Madame Okoro dreaded. Intelligent, confident, and stunningly beautiful. The moment Amara stepped into the compound, the air crackled with tension. Madame Okoro's face hardened into its familiar stone-like expression. She gave Amara a cold, dismissive greeting and spent the rest of the evening ignoring her. Akane was caught in the middle, torn between the woman he loved and the mother he was trying to understand. The battle for the heart of the compound had just begun, and this time the fight was not with the tenant, but within the family itself. Will Akane's love for Amara be enough to break through his mother's wall of bitterness? Or will the ghost of Idara claim another victim? Thanks, for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.